Imagine looking out your window, right? You see a lawn covered in these annoying fluffy weeds, and you're just actively wishing they were gone.
Yeah, the kind that just get everywhere.
Exactly. But then you wake up the next day, and you find that the universe has literally mutated them into medicinal herbs just to, like, match your spiritual vibration.
It sounds like magic, really.
It does. But that is the radical premise we are unpacking today for you. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore this fascinating, highly philosophical text written by Feng. It was published on July 22, 2024.
Right, and it's titled The Transformation of Life Requires a Complete Metamorphosis.
Yes, thank you. So we're exploring this reflective essay that maps out the spiritual journey from a, baseline human state to a celestial state. And I'm so excited about this because it blends nature observations with some really deep, kind of wild philosophical claims.
It really does, and we should clarify up front that we are just impartially reporting on the ideas presented in the text here.
Oh, absolutely.
We aren't endorsing the worldview, but rather, breaking down the author's highly unique perspective for you to mull over.
Right, exactly. We're just exploring the ideas. And the hook here is just wild. Like, what do a caterpillar, the human ego, and a supposed botanical anomaly where dandelions transform into plantains all have in common?
It is quite the puzzle.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before getting into the author's specific claims about human spirituality, we really need to establish how the text defines transformation.
Right, the definition is key here, because the author doesn't frame this journey as an additive process.
What do you mean by additive?
Well, you aren't just acquiring new skills to layer on top of your existing personality. The author uses the natural world as a blueprint for spiritual potential. Specifically, the classic example of a caterpillar crawling on the ground, transforming into a butterfly dancing among mountain blossoms.
Right, the butterfly metaphor. We've all heard that one before.
We have, but the author uses very specific phrasing. They say it isn't just a change, but a leap in life.
A leap in life.
Yes. A shift from one complete form of existence to another. Inside a chrysalis, a caterpillar doesn't just sprout wings, it actually releases enzymes that dissolve its own tissues.
Wait, really? It dissolves itself?
Literally digests itself into a cellular soup.
Oh, wow. That's kind of brutal.
It is. And then these highly organized groups of cells use that soup to build an entirely new anatomy.
Okay, so it's not like going to the gym and building muscle. To use an analogy for you listening, it's less like installing a software update on your phone and more like completely replacing the computer's operating system.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The original architecture is abandoned completely.
But, let me push back gently here. It's easy to see how a caterpillar physically changes under a microscope.
Right.
We can observe that. But how does the author apply that violent biological metamorphosis to something as abstract as human life?
Well, the author is suggesting that this leap concept is the foundation for everything. If a leaf-eating insect has the latent genetic coding to become a flying creature, human consciousness holds a similar latent spiritual coding.
Interesting.
The physical metamorphosis in nature proves that profound transformation is possible. I'd encourage you to keep this leap concept in mind as we move through the rest of the text.
Definitely. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because to answer that question of how this applies to real life, the text moves from the butterfly metaphor to this highly specific, surprising observation in nature.
Right. The essay pivots to a very specific setting.
Yeah, the Lifechanyuan International Family's North American retreat. Feng describes the slopes and grasslands around these cabins being completely overrun with dandelions.
And at first, they're described quite positively, right?
Yeah. When they bloom, it's this beautiful sea of gold. Quickly they turn into that white parachute fluff. And the seeds blow in the wind, they stick to the window screens of the cabins, and they just become this relentless nuisance.
It's a very relatable, mundane frustration.
Exactly. And this frustration peaks when the author takes a trip to Bella Coola. During this drive, Feng notices there are absolutely no dandelions. The landscape is completely clear.
Which is quite a contrast to the retreat.
Right. And it inspires this wish. The author just thinks, how wonderful it would be if the retreat back home could also be completely free of dandelions.
Just a desire for an environment that reflects order instead of chaotic clutter.
But then the author introduces this claim, a revelation from the Tao, as the text calls it. Feng claims that the dandelions along the cabin paths actually metamorphosed into plantains.
They didn't just die off.
No, they mutated. Whether you interpret this as a literal botanical miracle or, a powerful philosophical parable, the author is communicating something huge here about replacing something bothersome with something of higher value.
What's fascinating here is the specific choice of the plantain.
Right, why that plant?
Well, the text goes out of its way to establish a value hierarchy. The dandelion weed is just chaotic spread. But the plantain is highly intentional. The author cherishes it because its seeds have medicinal qualities.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and the leaves are edible. The text even mentions gathering them for a tangy spring dish. So the plantain represents utility, nourishment, and healing.
That's a massive upgrade from a weed sticking to your window screen.
Exactly. And impartially speaking, our goal here isn't to verify the botany of this claim.
Right, we're not fact-checking the plants today.
No, we're trying to understand the author's worldview. The text is arguing that nature provides signs. It's showing that profound, unimaginable transformation is possible.
Okay, so building directly on that dandelion to plantain transformation, we arrive at the core thesis of the essay. If a weed can become a medicinal plant, how does a human achieve their own leap in life?
This is where we get into the author's definition of the human state versus the celestial state.
Right. The text defines the human state as being characterized by self-centeredness, ego, and attachment.
Those are the anchors, basically.
Yeah, the anchor is keeping us down. And to achieve this metamorphosis to a celestial state, the author introduces these 6 words of wisdom. You must be unselfish, selfless, and free from attachment.
Unselfish, selfless, and free from attachment.
So what does this all mean? Because bringing this directly to you listening, this sounds incredibly difficult for the average person. I mean, human survival often relies on a healthy amount of self-interest, right?
It certainly feels that way in modern society.
Right. I'm attached to my life, my family, my career. If I completely drop my ego, how jarring is this metamorphosis for the everyday person? It feels like you just become unable to function.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer destabilization you're feeling is exactly what the author is talking about. The ego fights back.
Like the caterpillar resisting the cellular soup.
Exactly. Within the context of the text, the ego and our attachments are what keep us in the baseline human state. The author is suggesting that just as the dandelion must completely cease being a dandelion to become a plantain,
You have to stop being human.
yes, a human must shed their ego entirely to reach this new celestial realm. You cannot hold on to earthly attachments, even noble ones, if you want to make the leap.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us to the celestial realm itself, because the listener might assume this is talking about an afterlife, right? Like, suffer now, shed your ego, and go to heaven when you die.
That's a very common trope in spiritual texts, yes.
But we must clarify the author's radical claim here. This is framed as an actionable, present-day reality.
Right, it's not a geographical destination after death.
No. The author concludes that those who achieve this unselfishness, selflessness, and detachment, they've already achieved metamorphosis. They're living a celestial life in this world right now.
Not an earthly one.
Exactly. And the author specifically claims that many members of Lifechanyuan currently embody this truth in their daily lives. Just imagine what a community actually looks like if everyone has truly shed their ego.
It would certainly eliminate interpersonal drama.
No hoarding resources, no manipulation. It's incredibly optimistic, honestly. His belief that heaven isn't a place you go, but a state of being you achieve through this leap.
This raises an important question, though, when you synthesize the entire journey of the text.
What's that?
The author believes that environment like the physical retreat and mindset are deeply linked. The physical metamorphosis of the plants in nature is actually mirroring the spiritual metamorphosis of the community members.
Oh, wow. So the environment is basically catching the spiritual vibe of the people.
Essentially, yes. The inner purity is manifesting in the physical flora. The weeds of ego are purged from the mind, so the physical weeds mutate into harmony. Again, we are just impartially reporting the author's beliefs here, but it's a completely intertwined view of reality.
It really is. It's a massive concept.
Great.
So let's recap the journey of this deep dive for you. We started with the violent mechanism of the caterpillar's leap, right? Digesting itself to become a butterfly.
A total teardown of the original form.
Right. Then we moved to that surprising transformation of the annoying dandelions mutating into nourishing plantains. And finally, arriving at this ultimate goal of shedding the ego and attachment to achieve a celestial state on Earth.
It's a demanding framework.
It really is. But here is why this matters to you. Even if you aren't trying to achieve some mystical celestial state today, this text offers a really powerful framework. It lets you evaluate what ego-driven weeds might be cluttering up your own mental window
It's
screens.
a great lens for a self-audit. What low-level anxieties or petty grievances are you holding on to?
Exactly. And that brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over long after you finish listening. We know human metamorphosis requires shedding all attachments, right?
Hmm,
So what is the single deepest attachment in your life right now that you would find the hardest to let go of?
that's a tough question.
It is. But think about it. What might you transform into if you actually did let it go?